Down the bitch gang.
Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust.
You sound scared.
It's about have the guts, we here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to another 5 on the Floor. This is a post-game edition. Tonight's floor plan. I am your host, Greg Sylvander. With me on 5 on the Floor, we have Digital Adel Major Passons. We come to you directly following the Miami Heat's 114-104 victory at home on Pat Riley Court at the Kaseya Center. This was a game that, and we'll get into it a little bit more, didn't start out great, but they ended up figuring out ways to get another victory to add to this winning streak. And some of the distractions that have been floating around this team recently didn't seem to ultimately impact them on the court. We will get into all that. First, though, want to shout out Off the Floor. That is our Discord server. Unbelievable. Off the Floor is our Discord server. You got to check it out. This is the most heat anywhere. We have channels where you can talk Miami Heat basketball all day, but also there's channels to talk other sports, draft prospects, transactions, you name it. We got it. $2.99, $3.99 on your Apple device. Check out Off the Floor. That is our Discord server for the most heat anywhere. All right, fellas. So now we're going to get into this game. It would be crazy of us to not acknowledge that in the few days that the Heat had off, there was some noise and it got national and it was related to Jimmy Butler. And it was funny because Brady Hawk mentioned when the Phoenix Suns rumors popped off about Jimmy Butler and that being a destination that could be viable for him, which we'll see. Although I think, there is some things with Phoenix that could get interesting, but that's another show altogether. Brady said if he comes with orange braids to the next game, that's going to be, an interesting thing. And he came to the game with those. So it was just an interesting thing that I think ultimately didn't really have a big bearing on the result. Adele, I'm going to go to you first because this was a situation where the Heat started out rough. And we're going to get to all the segments and we want to talk about the player of the game and the play of the game and some of the defending the house stuff. But this game started out ugly. I think the Heat got down as much as 14 or 16, one of the two. Either one of y'all correct me. And they looked just kind of listless, and that was not a way to come. And you wanted energy from that first unit to start a game against a kind of, basement-dwelling Toronto Raptors team. You didn't get that. And then Spoelstra made an adjustment. And I think it's kind of the theme that we're going to get into tonight. And we're not even going to tie it to a segment. It is the theme of the night. Talk about what Spoelstra went to tonight that kind of turned the tides for Miami and got them back rolling in this game.
Yeah, the biggest lead that Toronto had was 16 points, and it was largely due to the lackadaisical effort the Miami Heat came out with. They didn't really have any energy. Their offense wasn't crisp. Their decisions weren't crisp. And primarily their defense was porous. They weren't playing very hard defensively. They weren't making the proper rotations, and they were getting bullied in the paint too. They were losing the paint points early by a lot. Like I think at one point it was like 8 to like 23 or something points in the paint. It was something ridiculous. And what Coach Spo did, and what a lot of coaches will do, is if you have a player that has talent but's been out of the rotation for a long time, that player, if you give them playing time, they're going to play very, very hard. And that's what happened with Niko Jovic. He came in and he supplied that spark. He played really, really hard. Him and Drew Smith both played really hard, changed the whole momentum and vibe of the game, because with all that stuff swirling, as you mentioned, for them to come out flat as they did, to, not give the effort, weren't playing defense. Jimmy had like 9 points in this game or something really low, tweaked his ankle a little bit at the half. Like the vibes would have been unbelievably bad had this score held, but Drew Smith and Jovic came off the bench and really changed that energy. And the one thing too, I want to point out about Jovic on the offensive end, it looked like he had a lot more lift on his jump shot. So his jump shot had a lot more arc, and he started actually burying some of those, which is huge for his offensive game. And for the Miami Heat.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of 2 from 3, 4 of 5 overall, 14 points, 24 minutes. I mean, to put that in perspective, Jaime Jaquez played 15 minutes. So Niko went from getting DMP coach's decision to all of a sudden being a primary rotation guy. Big spark. You alluded to the other guy that I'm going to let Major talk about a bit here, because as much as, the player of the game may not end up being either of these two individuals, there's aspects of what they brought tonight that kind of made them players of the game, frankly, so they should get recognition. But we're going to go with some of the top shelf statistical guys there. Drew Smith is the other one. 33 minutes. Like, Spoelstra is leaning into Drew Smith in a big way, Major, and he's playing well. I mean, you can't deny that he's not making mistakes. This is a game where he had 3 assists to 1 turnover. That's about what you want from a point guard. Even though I guess, position, Sean's going to yell at me for even saying point guard out loud. But Major, your thoughts on Drew Smith, because Adel mentioned the way that it was kind of the pairing of Niko and Drew Smith and the energy that they injected. And I thought that this is just another sign that I think Drew Smith is a mainstay in this rotation going forward until further notice.
Yeah, not only do I think Drew Smith deserves to be in the rotation, there's 2 things. One, he might be the best, and to use your words, point guard on the team right now. At least the one Spo feels like he can trust the most, right? Other people handle the ball, but if you want to give people positions while they're on the court, Drew Smith is probably the most trusted point guard right now. Then, not only does he deserve a rotation spot, I think it's like legitimately becoming an argument. He needs a full-fledged contract, not a 2-way. Like everyone was talking about Kashad at first. Now they need Drew Smith. And I even big Drew Smith homer, never thought I would say like they actually need him. And that's a shout out to him. His defense, like Digital Adele was saying, and how a lot of people have said, on playback and other things, it's like a difference maker. And in this game, when him and Jovic went in, completely different game. You never have to worry about Drew not giving max effort. Doesn't matter if it's a 20-point game, 30-point game, up or down, or if it's a close game. He is there to do his job, and he always does it. That was very important because, like Adele said, they came out with no energy. And defense at this level, a lot of times for most players, is largely energy and how much you're willing to put into it. A lot of them have physical tools and ways that they can impact on defensive end. Now, if you have other people, doesn't matter if you're, Jimmy Butler, doesn't matter if you're Tyler Herro, Duncan Robinson, don't care what names attach to you. If you're not giving effort, you're going to get cooked on defense. And they needed someone to be kind of that dog and just get a stop or two. And Drew was that guy. He did his thing on offense, just being that sound, reliable guy. 11 points, 3 of 7 shooting. You alluded to it, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. But his defense, him and Jovic with that energy are what turned it around. So, Greg, I'm glad you said it. I was kind of thinking they're like the quote-unquote players of the game, because if they don't switch that, the energy in the second quarter, I mean, we could be talking about a 30-point blowout. That's kind of how it was going.
Yeah, and with the Jimmy rumors that took place, and I've said this on other platforms, check us out on Playback, come watch games with us, but I've probably also said it on Off the Floor. The worst thing that could have happened with all this Jimmy Butler noise is them to blow this game at home against a lowly Toronto Raptor team. So I'm saying it again, and I'm happy that that didn't happen. Just to close the loop on Drew Smith, check this out. In 4 games in December, he's averaging 30 minutes. 10 points a game on 48% field goal shooting. He's 53% from 3 on almost 4 attempts, 4.5 rebounds, almost 3 assists. I mean, I know it's a small sample. We're talking 4 games, but Drew Smith is playing really well. Let's get to the actual, what we will call player of the game. When you talk about overall statistics, let's get to that segment sponsored by Insurance by Lynette. Aggressive. Let's get to it.
And now it's time for the A-Aggressive Insurance Player of the Night, sponsored by our friend Lynette. You can find her at insurancebylynette.com. That's with 2 N's and 2 T's, insurancebylynette.com. If you need car insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, or any other type of insurance, she's the person to go to. Based in Lauderhill, she services the entire Tri-County area here in South Florida, and she will make sure to get you the best deal. She'll probably talk to you about the heat while you're at it. Reach out to her, insurancebylynette.com. And now, the player of the game.
So the theme so far has been that 2 guys kind of came off the bench and did what they did. So the player of the game, we're going to kind of just keep it rolling in that fashion. We're going to talk about 2 different guys. First, I'm going to talk about Bam Adebayo, who is, I feel like, slowly coming out of the funk that everybody has watched him go through. I mean, it's not perfect, 8 of 17 tonight, but still, that's trending in the right direction, especially with that high volume field goal attempts. 21 points in 34 minutes, 16 rebounds, 5 assists. I just felt like this was a game where Bam is starting to look more and more comfortable. He's making moves where you can tell it's the quick twitch muscle taking over, and it's not him thinking about what's going on. Adele, what were you, from your perspective, do you think that Bam is finally kind of getting over the hump with the shooting slump stuff, and just your overall thoughts on the way Bam impacted tonight and how people need to jump back on the Bam wagon, as you've called it?
Absolutely. Get back on the Bam wagon right now. The train's leaving the station. One of the things that aren't good, that isn't good statistically, like his 3-point shooting is only 33%. But the thing that jumps off the tape whenever you watch him in this stretch is how confident he's taking these shots. So regardless of the result, the confidence is there. And that the same goes for those mid-range shots. Like, he's getting into his mid-range bag, he's getting into his floaters, and he's getting back to his spots that he was comfortable with last season. So if you look at his shot chart, he's just getting back to things that he was more comfortable with. The 5-out offense was a big buzzword coming out of camp, and they tried it. And then as they've gone along, they've kind of adjusted those rules to allow him to get the spots where he's more comfortable. And he's starting to just, as you said, you can see he's not thinking about whether he should take the shots or not. He's getting to his spot where he's comfortable, and he's letting it fly, baby. That's what's taking place with Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, and on a night where Jimmy Butler was 3 of 8, had 11 points, he did some of the other things, 29 minutes. It was kind of a pedestrian game from Jimmy overall. To see Bam play more of a lead role offensively and be able to do that at a much higher level than he started out the season. He's still got a ways to go to get to, peak Bam, but I love the steps forward. But the other guy that's just becoming he's been the player of the game the most times this season. He's probably trending towards being an all-star if the Heat can stay in the top 5 in the Eastern Conference. And I think that they probably can. Tyler Herro, Major, like, this guy figures out a way to get to efficient numbers shooting-wise. 23 points on 9 of 13, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, rock solid. It's becoming a situation where I start to wonder, is Tyler taking the type of leap, and I don't want to overstate it because it's Toronto and they're bad defensively, but just seeing the consistency and the fact that like people can't get him off of his spots, and that's just new to me. I think that it changes maybe the trajectory of how you could build a team with Tyler Herro. Your thoughts on him tonight, but also just the idea of maybe Tyler Herro being the best player on the Heat. And obviously, I think you still need a 1A, but that's a conversation for another day. But just the overall impact of Tyler this season, I think it's just worth us talking a little bit about on this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Herro was how I've said he was almost on every post game I've done because he, like you said, he's been their most consistent player. He's almost always the player of the night. Today was efficiency that really steps out. 9 of 13 for 23 points. That is elite numbers. He didn't have to shoot 20 shots to get 20 points like we see some other days with him and with some other players that people just look at scoring numbers like that. That's truly elite. That, in my opinion, if someone can shoot 9 of 13 and be consistently efficient, like Herro has been all this year, that changes the trajectory of not just him, but the whole team, because he's no longer having to be that volume shooter guy to make his impact. So when you project for like playoffs or this season, next season, quote unquote, maybe going to a Bam and Herro build, right? Like that gives you clues that, hey, he is making that next leap as a player. I don't think he can be the best player on a team.
Agree.
Deep playoff run. Now he's sustaining it for the regular season, and they're surviving in a middle of the Eastern Conference, which hasn't been great, but they're sustaining. I think he can, if he's your best player in the regular season for most nights, you can make the playoffs. For the playoffs, I think Bam has to be their best player, and then Jimmy, and then if Herro's still that efficient elite scorer like he has been this year, then I think we're back to full delusional major. We can make the finals, and we're right there.
I'm glad that you went there because this has been the best stretch of Heat basketball all season, and it is the only avenue with which a Heat fan like you or I that is generally overtly positive about the trajectory of the team. Like this has been the moment where you feel like, okay, maybe they could figure something out and make things interesting. And I just think that is an interesting element in itself. Let's get to the play of the night, and then we'll kind of unpack the defending the house segment as well, and just get to final thoughts. This was a game where the Heat made short work of Toronto by the end of it. It didn't start pretty, but there was a play in the fourth quarter that I want to reference. We'll get to it now.
And now it's time for the X-Ray of the Play of the Day, brought to us by our friends over at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Nelson and his team will bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you. If you work in a hospital or a medical office, get a consultation today at c-armandstaffing.com or give them a call at 561-891-9620. Their fleet of trucks at your service. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services, 561-891-9620. And now, the X-Ray of the Play of the Day.
So I'm going to give Major and Adel a chance to shout out any other plays that I may have forgotten about, but I pegged one in my notes that we were going to go to here, and it happened in the fourth quarter. It was the catalyst for the play was, and this was at 8:48 in the fourth quarter, 8:48 to go, was a Bam Adebayo defensive rebound. He kicked it out to Drew Smith. Drew Smith quickly tapped it up in the air with a very precise pass to Nikola Jovic for a running layup that brought the score to 100-82. And it was an and-one situation. Niko didn't convert on the free throw, but the play was beautiful. Do either of you have any other submissions before we get to defending the house?
So I don't have a play. I have a sequence of plays by Bam where he was just running up the score. He could have had, 9 straight, I believe, or
yep.
Yeah, it would have been 9 straight, but he missed the midi on the baseline. But just that sequence by Bam just showed how good he was tonight on the offensive end. But I agree, that definitely should be the play of the night, the Bam to Drew to Jovic.
Yeah,
Major, Bam did have a stretch where I think he may have got to 9 and it was 11 that he missed out on. He may have scored 9 straight, but don't quote me on that. That was really nice to see. Any other plays that you can think of that we should remember? I'm putting you on the spot here, but anything that you got for us?
Yeah, I'll say I have 2 that jump out. I always love 4-point plays. So Tyler Hero's 4-point play. And then in the first quarter, Bam had a good defensive block. So he had a good defensive play when they weren't playing any defense. That was like the one time they played defense. It was a 3-on-1 fast break, and he came up with a pretty impressive block backpedaling. So I want to shout that one out.
Yeah, I mean, that probably could have made the defending the house segment. It's a good segue into that. Let's get right to it.
And now it's time for our Defending the House segment, sponsored by our friends over at The Real Estate Shop. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. That's with 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com, or at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. This is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin. They help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties with a proven on-market strategy. The Real Estate Shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame because Amanda and Javier have a deep understanding of the local market. So check them out. Again, it's at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram, realestateshopfl.com, or give them a call at 954-268-9812. And now, who defended the house?
The Heat defended the house as it related to RJ Barrett. Now, I know he did record a triple-double, so shout out to him for that. But for Toronto to come into Miami and win, they were going to need somebody to really be explosive on the offensive end. Grady Dick tried, and he was relatively inefficient, 8 of 19. But, I mean, he had his moments, 3 of 11 from 3. So they did a good job defending him. Haywood Highsmith started out on him, but, you know, a lot of other players saw him throughout the game. But RJ Barrett is where I'm honing in on. 5 of 18, 1 of 4 from 3, only got to the line twice. So despite the triple-double, I think that this was a game where the Heat did a great job at taking Toronto's best players and making them worse versions of their average selves. And that's how you get through these games against the sub 500 teams. I think like something that you may have seen last year is a team like this coming in and shooting the lights out, and you have some player that you never heard of that scored 24, and you maybe drop a game at home like this. So it's good to see Miami keeping the defense up and just kind of taking a team like this, and even though they got down early, figuring out a way to get it done. Those are our 3 segments. Final thoughts, Major, I'll go to you first. The Miami Heat, again, get the victory, 114-104. They improved to 3 games above 500, 13-10, so they're right in the thick of the Eastern Conference. Frankly, I mean, they're not far from being a home court seed if you're top 4, you know what I mean? So they're in an interesting position despite all the drama with Jimmy and this and that. This is them kind of positioning themselves during a stretch of games where people doubted whether they were going to be able to stay alive in the conference, and they're kind of looking like they're trending up. Your final thoughts before we get to Adele to close this out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked all offseason long that their first couple games are going to be hard, and then they had a little lull, and then they have another harder stretch of games. If you're looking at 13-10, I think it sounds a little bit worse than it is if you want to look at who they've played. And they've had some really just tough losses. That, I think, makes it feel worse is just how they've lost. And then they're helped out by a weak Eastern Conference. So that gives them some leeway there. But I was encouraged about that turnaround. You've had a couple big games, a couple important games, at least to the fans and their perspective of you're trying to see what this team can get. They say that give them 20 games, we're past that as well. And they come out, you can see a lot of teams sometimes they just have a little lull. Last year's team probably would have lost this game if they get down like that at the start. They came back, and it was due to those depth pieces. And, Jovic, shout out to him for not complaining. And like when he goes out there, not trying to do too much either. He was a star in his role. So stuff like that, I think, speaks volumes to the type of depth and type of team that they have. Still a lot of work to do, but they are definitely trending in the right direction. And we will see as they continue this stretch if they can, maybe climb up into that 4th seed.
Yeah, and they get an extended break again, which is weird. Like they're going to get now a few days off before they end up playing Detroit on Monday, and then they don't play again until Friday, I think. So they go like several days again being off. So that's going to be a weird moment for them. But for a team with some of the aging vets that they have, I think that they will also be able to kind of get healthy. Adel, as I'm looking here, they're a game out of the 4 seed, and Orlando, who now has injuries to their top 2 players, they're only 2 games behind them for a top 3 seed in the East. So, I mean, I know I'm not going to they always say I sunshine pump, and that this, it's all about, talking the culture and this and that. But this is probably as encouraging a stretch of Heat basketball as we've seen, and they've got a chance to build on that with Detroit coming up. Your final thoughts on tonight's win and just the Heat overall, and what we could maybe look forward to in the next few games and as they head into the new year.
So one of the things that I absolutely going to look forward to, and it showed up again tonight, and it showed up all season, is the leap that the future all-star Tyler Herro is taken, and what that does for this team. Because the narrative has always been just get Jimmy into the playoffs. So what's going to make this Miami Heat team dangerous is that if you can get a healthy Jimmy Butler, he doesn't get traded, you get a little roster consolidation with some of those bottom pieces by the trade deadline, and you get this level of Tyler Herro, you get Bam's confidence back. I don't think that's sunshine pumping. I think that's finally hitting their stride with something we've all said. We want to see them clicking all at the same time, and we've still yet to see it, but this sets up very well for that. And so if we can get role players like Drew Smith, Haywood Highsmith, Pele Larson gets healthy, you can get a little bit either from Jovic or Jaime, then you've got a rotation around some core pieces that are playing at a very, very high level, dare I say again, an all-star level with Tyler Herro. Then it gets very interesting because Jimmy doesn't have to get traded. He doesn't have to want to trade, and he doesn't have to opt out. Like, he could opt in, which is something that is a different pod for a different day. But if you get this sort of consistent play from these guys, and this stretch is going to show that, and they get to a 3 seed, there's no way they're going to give up on this build at that point.
Exactly. They're not going to give up on a season where they're in the top 3 in the conference, 4 in the conference, and just I'm sorry, folks, like even for all of the fans out there that just want to see something new, want to see transactions, want to see them pivot to another era, when they're in the thick of the Eastern Conference because of the way that seeding works, and then you get in the playoffs and it's a game of matchups. And no matter what your record was, if you can find a path, the Heat are always going to try to take that path. And so we'll see if that's the ultimate way that this goes. I think it's a little premature to make a prediction either way, but the Heat are continuing to get victories led by Bam, led by Tyler, even in an off night from Jimmy. We'll see what color his braids are next. Thank you to Adel and Major for joining me. Thank you to our sponsors. Don't forget Off the Floor. And we'll have you covered for the next Heat game, even though it's several days from now. And we'll probably podcast every single day up until the next Heat game. So check us out there. Peace.